Hi, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. So excited you're here because we're going to be talking about the authors who grasped my attention in 2024. These aren't necessarily brand new authors, they are just new authors to me. And we're going to be talking about ones who I haven't already talked about in my last video, which was my top books of 2024. I had a hard time narrowing it down, so these are ones that I didn't get a chance to talk about in that one, just because I couldn't talk about everybody. And also, I'm focusing on ones that, are lesser known. So even though I really enjoyed other authors that are wildly popular, I'm focusing on ones that maybe you haven't heard of or ones that aren't talked about as often. Also, if you didn't catch my video of my, favorite books of the year, I'll link it down below. I also talked about my worst books of the year, so I'll link that one down below as well. I think they're both equally important. I had a fun time making both of them, and yeah, I hope you check those out if you haven't already. And let's get to it. The first one is Will Elliott, who is the author of the Pilo family Circus. This is an older book. I think it was published in 2006. I have loaned this one to a friend, so I don't have a physical copy with me. This guy, I believe his name is Jamie. Jamie is... he's this guy who kind of gets pushed around a lot. He doesn't necessarily speak up for himself. One day he's out and he has car trouble. He gets out of the car and he comes across these creepy clowns. Well, and they're full-on clowns. They have the whole costumes, the makeup, the big shoes, everything. They're doing something weird. They're doing some suspicious things, and they're kind of hilarious too. They throw out this substance. And why this guy thinks it's a great idea, I don't know. But he picks this substance up and he takes it home. So these clowns track him down. And he lives with roommates. They break into his house. They trash his room, they trash his house, they do things to his roommates and everything else. They leave these notes saying, "You have 36 hours to make us laugh. If you don't, we're gonna kill you. If you do, you are joining our circus." So it's kind of a no-win situation. I believe that's how it went down. It's been a while since I read this. He ends up passing the test and he joins their circus. When he puts on the clown makeup, he develops this alter ego. It's kind of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation, which is what drew me to this book. It's a bit of comedy horror, so there is comedy in it. It's weird, it's creepy, there's gore, there's a little bit of everything in here. I loved whenever the clowns were stalking around in the beginning. To me, that was creepier. I love those parts. I could do a whole book on them just stalking around because they did such weird things and they had their own little flair about it. They were leaving dead bats and setting things on fire and completely trashing his whole room. But then they would leave him a Valentine card and flowers. It was hilarious. And then when they actually got to the circus, it was really good too, and I really enjoyed it. To me, it was a completely different vibe though. Not in a bad way, it was good too. It was still creepy, but them stalking around was even more creepy to me. With Jamie, not knowing what they were capable of and stuff. You knew that the clowns were doing it, but they're not being seen, them being all sneaky and not knowing what they were going to do next. That was so creepy. The circus, there are all these long-standing feuds between different groups within the circus and all these different things happening. The circus was really cool. It was very imaginative and really weird. There was a lot of weirdness going on there, but it was really about Jamie's alter ego and him between the two different personalities he has, his normal one and then with the mask. And I have a lot to say about it, but there's not a lot I could say there without spoilers. If you read it and want to talk about it, I'm down to talk about it because I have a lot to say. There were some gross things, there were some creepy, disturbing things, there was gore, there was violence. It had it all. Also comedy too, of course, because it's kind of comedy horror. But it had that undertone of darkness to it, and it was such a vibe. I really enjoyed Will Elliott's writing style, and I know there's a part 2 of this, and I really want to get it and read it. Really want it. We read this for my in-person book club, and we all loved it. So that should tell you a lot, but it was really good. I would definitely read anything by this author at this point because I so enjoyed it. This is in no particular order, by the way, because I couldn't pick order for these. I enjoyed all of these. Next one is Jessica Gomez, and that book is Pieces of You. This was sent to me by the author. This is a thriller, and this one really surprised me. It had a lot more to it. It had a lot more meat to it than a typical thriller. I'm going to read you the back because this is one that I don't want to give anything away. I want to make sure that I don't say too much. Nora Aberdeen has been a mess since her mother died. Once a promising young journalism student, she's dropped out of school and stopped taking care of herself. On a whim, she ventures out of her comfort zone to the deteriorating small town of Woodbridge to meet a blind date, where she is embarrassingly stood up. On her desolate trek back home, a visibly distressed and bloody young woman darts in front of her car, causing Nora to veer off the road. When Nora regains consciousness, the woman is gone. Nora's estranged uncle, a sheriff's deputy, comes calling with information about a growing list of young women turning up dead in Woodbridge, including the woman who caused Nora's accident, whose death has been, to Nora's shock, declared a suicide. His colleagues have written the women off as overdoses, but suspicious circumstances and the department's ineptitude point to something more nefarious. Nora finds renewed purpose as she dusts off old journalism skills to uncover the secrets of the missing women. When she discovers her connection to them, a strange motive unfurls. I was hooked from the very beginning of this, and I simply could not put it down. It was so good. And this is one of those that I thought of for weeks after I finished it. And that is really rare for thrillers for me. I have a hard time with thrillers. I think I've said that to you guys before. I was never bored with this book. It was so good. This one touches on grief, complicated family relationships, addiction, and female friendships. So those are the main themes here. It is full of strong and intelligent female characters, which I absolutely love. I thought the characters were all well developed and the plot was very well thought out. This is not all suspense like a typical thriller. There's a lot of heart to it as well, because she's recently reconnected with her uncle because she found out he's a police officer because he reached out to her about the case. And now the two of them are working together on the case. On top of that, she is grieving her mother. So yeah, there's a lot of heart to it. There's a lot more depth to it than a typical thriller to me. And I think that's why it really worked for me. This also had multiple points of view, which really worked in this case because I think it really added to the plot and it really helped move the plot along. There were a lot of heart-racing moments in this, and also there was a scene in here that actually gave me chills. And that has never happened to me before in a thriller. So all in all, this was really good. If you enjoy thrillers, and even if you don't, you may pick this up because I really enjoyed it. And I really love Jessica Gomez's writing style, and I would definitely pick another book up by her. Next up is Cass Kay, author of Legacy Witches. You probably remember me talking about this one because I went on and on about it. This was in a Twisted Retreat box, and this is the first in a duology. I don't know if there are going to be more books or not, but I haven't read part 2 yet. I was really hoping Twisted Retreat would have another special edition to where they would match. I had the absolute best time with this. It was so fun. It is nice and witchy and atmospheric. Vienna, her mom has recently passed away, and she has inherited the family's house, and it's a big Victorian mansion. It is in Salem, which is an excellent setting. But she has kind of removed herself from the coven, and she's been removed from the coven for years. But she's been forced to kind of face them again. She's been forced to deal with all these things. She's back in the town, and she's had to attend her mom's funeral, and she's had to, deal with all these things. On top of that, she can see ghosts. And since this house is really haunted, she can see ghosts everywhere. She encounters the ghost of a missing local witch who's been missing for a while, so she gets wrapped up in this whole mystery. On top of that, the house itself is a character because the house is possessed by a demon, and it's hilarious because it throws these tantrums, and it is so fun. It is so fun, so cute. But I loved that. Vienna befriends this local trans woman named Dee, and I love the friendship that they spark. It is so special. I love their conversations. I love the banter between the two of them. It's perfect. It's perfection. Even though this is fun, it's funny, it's somewhat light, there are also some really terrifying moments because the coven is so scary. The witches of the coven are freaking terrifying. They are a true force. Yeah. This was just a good time. It was just a fun witchy read. I love Cass Kay's writing style. It's just playful, but also has that spooky tone to it. and I just really enjoyed it. Next up, we have Marina Yuszczuk. This is Thirst, and it's translated by Heather Cleary. Let me tell you what it's about, first of all. This one had 2 parts. First part follows a female vampire in the 19th century. At first, she is able to roam around freely, feed when she needs to, and then the world kind of changes. So suddenly she's having to be more careful. She's having to hide away and be more cautious. So she's dealing with this unbelievable thirst. And on top of that, she's very lonely. You know, imagine always being very thirsty and lonely, but there's no end to it because she is immortal. She's living forever. She does meet some people along the way. Some help her, some she feeds off of, some she toys with, some she becomes infatuated with, some she kills instantly, some she, you know, wants to keep around but she can't help but to indulge in. It's gothic, it's sexy, it's lush, it's gorgeously written. There are a lot of comparisons to darkness and night and the moon, and I just thought it was really pretty. I absolutely loved her character and how gothic part 1 was. Part 1 was definitely my favorite, and part 1 took up most of the book. Part 2 is in present day, and it follows a mother. She has a young son, and her mother has a terminal illness. So she's dealing with a lot of things, and she herself is very lonely, and she's just dealing with a lot of things. And she comes across the vampire, and I won't tell you how they come in contact with each other. You'd have to read it to find out. But the 2 paths cross, and so the storylines come together. Of course, both parts 1 and 2, there's LGBTQ rep, themes of loneliness, obviously, throughout the whole book. The whole thing is just really gorgeous. Love the ending. Can't tell you anything about it, but I absolutely love the ending. I love how it all came together. Absolutely love the writing style. It's gorgeous. Obsessed. It's kind of poetic and flowery, and just really pretty. Next up, we have William Pauley III. And the book is 12 Residents Dreaming. This was actually sent to me by the author. He sent me a couple of books. First, let me tell you what this was about. Anacoy Martin, which is a wild name, he is shipwrecked in the middle of the ocean. He's floating around on a raft, and he finds the 8th block tower in the middle of the ocean. Inside the tower, under the water, he finds a graveyard. In this graveyard are 12 bodies. When he puts his fingers into the eye sockets of their skulls, he can see their whole stories. And this book, The 12 Residents Dreaming, each of these stories is the stories of these bodies. So the 12 Residents Dreaming. Which, what a concept. It's so wild. It's like the imagination of this guy. First of all, I was absolutely transfixed from the very beginning. I don't think I've ever been that transfixed by a story ever. It was so wildly imaginative, and I mean, it was absolutely unreal. I could not believe the imagination of him. This is part of actually a series, but it can be read as a standalone. I definitely want to buy the entire series. I haven't been able to yet, just because of money restraints, but I definitely want to buy the whole series because I'm obsessed with his writing style. It is so very descriptive. His writing style is very unique. Each character had their own unique tone of voice. There are 12 stories in here, and this is not too thick of a book, but it absolutely amazed me how much detail and how much character development was fit into each story. Like, I cannot imagine what he could do with a full novel. I would love to see that. My favorite story in here was called Killing Teddy, and it involved bugs, which I'm shocked how much I loved that, but yeah, it was crazy. Every story in here was so descriptive. I think that is why they're so wild, and I think that is why I loved them so much, was because of the descriptions and just the imagination. And so they are so out there. They're very fever dreamy, and yeah, I'm obsessed. They're very weird. They're so hard to explain. They're just very fever dreamy and weird, and something I've never read before. I've never read anything like this, and the cover is very cool. William Pauley III is a creative genius, and I want to go back and read everything he's ever written ever because I'm obsessed. Next up, I just talked about this author back in October, so you probably remember. I'm going to talk about him again because I love this book. And he is James Cooper, and the book is Moonlit Massacre. Love this cover. It's very subtle but also haunting at the same time with the yellow. I don't know, there's something about that. I actually got to meet him and actually got to hear his thought process and kind of his whys on a couple of things here. And it was really interesting. It was fascinating to hear kind of why he did a couple of things, and I'm going to explain that too. Let me tell you, I'm going to read you the back real quick. In the summer of 1978, 6 employees of a sirloin stockade buffet restaurant found themselves forced into a walk-in freezer during a robbery, then executed, leaving no witnesses. The shocking events and resulting 9-month nationwide manhunt left a deep scar in the psyche of Oklahoma City residents and serves as inspiration for this debut novel by English professor and Oklahoma City City Councilor James Cooper. Rather than focus on the assailants, Cooper explores a young city rocked by tragedy and presents a diverse Oklahoma landscape overlooked by national news, utilizing elements of true crime, literary horror, and historical fiction to focus on the inner lives of Oklahomans from marginalized backgrounds. Moonlit Massacre draws from one of Oklahoma's most notorious crimes as well as other unsolved murders in the same time frame to knit together a story of a community gripped with fear. This was so unique because it's not your typical historical fiction, it's not your typical true crime, and it's not the typical slasher. It's somewhere in the middle. And not that it was a really cool concept and it was so uniquely done. Like I said, it was based on true events, but instead of focusing on the assailants, he chose to focus on the setting and the victims. It was a really unique setup, and I really appreciated that. He did an excellent job setting the scene and laying everything out, and it really paid off because it felt like I was there. I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma. I moved to Texas when I was a freshman in high school, and I did go back for college. I went to OU, and OU is mentioned in here, and Oklahoma City is mentioned in here. There are other places that I've lived that are mentioned in here, and places that I've visited. It was really cool to hear of places that I've actually been and lived. And of course, it was a different time. This is set in the 70s, but I could still see it. Like, even like he did such a great job of setting the scene. It was so cool to like see it in a different time and envision it in a different time. I loved that. I was there. Like, I could see it so vividly in my mind because of the descriptions, and you could feel it, you could see it, and it was amazing to me. Having grown up there, I can also attest to the fact that it is an excellent depiction of life in the South and growing up in the South, and especially growing up in a small southern town. He did an excellent job painting that picture. There were a lot of music and movie references, and there were also a lot of literary references that I thought were very clever. Of course, he's a professor, and I believe he's like, is he a literary professor? Literary, I don't remember what his exact title is, but I know he's a professor. So, English, literary, I don't remember his exact title, but somewhere in that realm. So he is a professor, so that does make sense. There's commentary on racism, homophobia, religion, and alcoholism. Those are some big themes throughout the book, especially those based in a small southern town. The pacing was really interesting because and this is something that he talked about whenever I actually went to the book release party. A couple things he talked about. One, he chose to write this in present tense, which was really interesting. And he said he did that on purpose because he wanted to slow the reader down. He intentionally wanted to slow the reader down so they were in the moment. He didn't want you to rush through this. He wanted you to take time, and he wanted you to feel it. So he wanted, at the slasher scenes and the heart racing scenes, he wanted you to be there. He wanted you to really feel it and be in the moment. And I really felt that because it's something I'd said in my review before I went to the book release party. So it was really funny that he said that. You have slower moments where you're getting to know the characters and you're getting to know their lives. And then there's all these like slasher things happening in between. So yeah, you have slower paces, and then you have quick heart racing things happening. But let me tell you, whenever those slasher moments happen, no joke, you are there. And I was there so much. And in those moments so much that I literally forgot where I was. At one point, my upstairs neighbor dropped something and I jumped. So it was very effective. This was excellent. It was very well done. I think my favorite part was just the setting. He did so good at setting that scene. It was so good. And this is a debut novel for him. I don't think he intends on writing anymore, but this was very excellent and I would definitely recommend it. Really good. Jason Parent, and that is Mischief Night Massacre. So this one is an anthology, and anthologies to me I have a hard time with sometimes. They're usually hit or miss. Usually there's at least a couple of stories that bring the average down. I enjoyed every single one of these. There was one where the ending was just meh, and I still loved it. So yeah, this was great. These were all very atmospheric. They had all the fall vibes that I love. It had all my favorite tropes. There were monsters. There were vampires. There was karma and revenge. There was even there was a haunted house story in here that was freaking awesome. Like, awesome. A big thing to note here was that it was very well curated. It was so well put together, and the pacing was great. Like the transitions between the stories, I just feel like it flowed really well together, if that makes sense. Like all the stories, they just went really well together. It was such a vibe. There was plenty of creepiness, there was gore, there was lots of tension, there was some heart, it had it all. It had everything I look for in horror. What made me fall in love with his writing is the way that Jason Parent is able to build tension and a sense of dread in a short story is nothing short of amazing. It's wild. I would love to read a full novel by him, because if he can do that in a short story, I cannot imagine what he could do with a full novel. Character development, the way he could do that in a short story, and all of them have all this character and all this personality and character development in just a few pages, was wild too. Absolutely love his writing style. Very descriptive. His descriptions definitely add to the creep factor in a big way. Every single one of these stories was very unique and things that I have never read before, which is really good, especially for a Halloween story. It's hard to find something that unique. Like I'm always looking for good Halloween stories, and they're kind of hard to find, which is surprising. I loved it. Next up, we have Mark Towse. And I read 3 books by this author, but this was my favorite. He has sent me all 3, and this was the very first one that he sent me. He sent it to me digitally, but then I loved it so much that I bought the physical copy. And I'm really sorry if there's a glare from the window. If I can't, then I'll put a picture of it here so you can see it better. But anyways, Chasing the Dragon. It's a superhero comedy, like action novel. I freaking loved it. I was surprised how much I loved this. I didn't know what to expect from it, because this is like an interesting genre for me, like the superhero thing. But I loved it immediately. This is another one, like if I could have had it in my top books of the year, I would have, if I could have fit it all in. Like if I didn't have to narrow it down so much. Simon, before his mom passed, he pledged to her that he would bring order to his city. His city is full of crime, and so he's gonna bring order to his city. So his mom has passed. Also, his mom was very verbally abusive to him. Simon has a lot of issues because of that. He's decided he's gonna be a superhero. So he goes and buys a suit and everything. Everybody calls it a leotard throughout the book. It's like a running joke and it's hilarious. He has to come up with a superhero name, which is another whole ordeal, and it's really funny, him coming up with the name. He ends up coming up with the name Reformo. I was laughing so hysterically at this that my kids came to check on me, and my kids want to read this book. And my son was like, "Can I read that?" And I'm like, "You're not ready." Wait a few years, kid, then you can read it. But I was laughing so much that I had my kids wanting to read. So that's pretty impressive. And they don't even read. Comedy level, I would compare this to Deadpool. If you like that level of snark and comedy, that's what I would compare this to. It was really funny because it was just very snarky and had a lot of wit. It's very action packed because Simon invented himself from scratch. He invented his superhero persona from scratch because he had no experience other than lifting weights some. He did not know what he was doing at all. So he's constantly getting himself into these situations because he's trying to be the hero all the time. So he just inserts himself into these situations. It's very action-packed through the whole thing. And you can't help but root for him. Because the poor thing has so many problems, and you really want him to win. And of course, you get a lot of his backstory. I love a hero backstory. I love getting to know more about him. You get his mother's nagging voice in his head the whole time, so you get a taste of like what he went through. And you meet other interesting characters along the way. You don't get to know a lot about them, but you do meet other interesting characters along the way, so that's fun. I thought this had the perfect blend of darkness and comedy. And I love Mark's writing style. Everything that I've read by him so far has had that touch of comedy, and I love it. All right, next up, we have 2 authors in one book, and that is Damien Casey and Kyra R. Torres, and this is Hot Pink Satanism. I'm surprised I don't hear this book talked about more. I have heard it talked about some. Like, this was freaking nuts. Like, absolutely bonkers. So random. Satan is retired, and now Baphomet is in charge of hell. So now it's not all darkness, it's all like sparkles and rainbows, and like it's all colorful and glittered up, and there's like chocolate pudding and unicorns, and yeah. And the unicorns are trying to take over, and they're trying to keep the unicorns from taking over. So these guys here are trying to keep the unicorns from taking over. It's funny because they're all these colorful, fluffy characters, but they're really violent. This does not look like a super violent book, but it was. Baphomet is this cute little pink fluffy guy here. And there's a heavy metal hamster. This little dude here. But yeah, this was freaking wild. It's full of confetti unicorn guts. There's like a fashion show. There are pop references. I freaking love the Meghan Trainor references. That was hysterical. I can't even explain the randomness that this book was. It was so random. And for 2 authors having written it, it was very cohesive. It was very smooth. I don't know how they did it. I don't know if they like one wrote half, the other one wrote half. I don't know how they put it together. I don't know what their writing process was, but it was very well put together. I don't know how something can be so cute and cuddly and fluffy and so violent at the same time, but this was really good. I enjoyed it. It was laugh out loud funny. It was ridiculous, but amazing. It was definitely 5 stars for me, and just, it was excellent. Next up, we have Tiffany D. Jackson, The Weight of Blood. This is a Carrie retelling. So this is set in a small town, a very racist small town, and it follows Maddie. And Maddie is biracial, but no one in her school knows that she's biracial. They all think she's white. Her dad, to me, is racist himself, and he's misogynistic as well. That's just my take. He's always beating into her head like, don't let anybody know that you're biracial. Make sure that they think you're white. Don't let anybody know. Don't ever let your hair get wet. And so she like very obsessively checks the weather. She checks it multiple times a day. She makes sure before she goes to school. You know, she's got to be very careful with that. And her dad is like, he says that he's protecting her, but I don't think he's protecting her. I think he's just racist and misogynistic, but that's just me. Anyways, one day there's a surprise rainstorm. They're outside. She's outside running for track or whatever, or PE or something, and there's a rainstorm, and her hair gets wet. So now everybody knows that she's biracial, and they start making fun of her. Somebody takes video of her hair, and it goes viral, and so it makes national news. Well, now the school has negative attention. So some of the kids at school, like on the school council or whatever, they are trying to do damage control. Well, up until this point, the school has had segregated proms still. That's how freaking racist this town has been. To try to do damage control, they're going to finally do the prom together. All the kids, one prom. Well, like it took this to do it. It's just, anyways. You know that prom is not going to go good. You know that some kids are going to die at prom. That's not a surprise. It says, the popular white class president convinces her black superstar quarterback boyfriend to ask Maddie to be his date, leaving Maddie wondering if it's possible to have a normal life But some of her classmates aren't done with her just yet. And what they don't know is that Maddie still has another secret, one that will cost them all their lives. You know it's not going to end well. You know from the very beginning it is not going to go good. This was so good. It is good for her horror at its finest. It is excellent. The ending is very satisfying. Love the writing. It's considered YA, but I loved it. Like, I didn't think the characters were unbelievable. I didn't have a hard time with it because I have a hard time with a lot of YA. I don't always like it, but I really enjoyed this one. I really loved Maddie. And yeah, it was good for her horror, and I ate it up. Of course, this has commentary on racism, religion, and misogyny. Huge themes in this. There are some lessons here. This is excellent. It was very well done. And I absolutely love Tiffany Jackson's writing style. I thought the way it all came together was excellent. All right, next up we have Nicole M. Wolverton. And this book is a Misfortune of Lake Monsters. It's a great summary read. It follows Lemon. Lemon has just been told that she is to take over the family's responsibility of keeping the town's lake monster, Old Lucy, alive. Her family has been impersonating the town's lake monster for generations. The reason that's important is because it brings in tourists, which is important to the town's economy. No one knows this family does that. Even her very closest friends have no idea she and her family do this. She's kind of bummed about it. She's got a lot of resentment because she really wanted to be a veterinarian. She wanted to go to college. And even the boy who really likes her, Troy, even he doesn't know that she and her family impersonate Old Lucy. Well, an actual lake monster appears, and she has decided that she needs to save the town. So she can't do it alone. So she has to tell her friends the big secret so that they can help her. This is considered YA, but again, like, the characters were believable to me. They were somewhat relatable. There was only one that was a little over the top, but she ended up being my favorite character, and that was Amelia. I was absolutely fascinated with her, and she was a side character in this, but I loved her. I really thought this was going to be a fun summary horror, and it was, but it was also darker than I expected. It took it farther than I expected. The horror came out of nowhere, especially at first. I'm like, oh, there it is. It was really good. The town gossip cracked me up. The way the gossip spread so fast, how wild those rumors got, was hysterical. There were action scenes that had me on the edge of my seat. Plenty of creepiness. There were jump scares that were great. I don't get a lot of those. Like, there's not very often that I get that in books. I also enjoyed the friend group, Lemon and her friends. I thought their bond was really special, and they were really fun. This is one that I would love a series on, honestly. It didn't leave it like at a weird spot or anything, but I would still love a series on it. I really wanted more of their little friend group. She did really well with characters. That's what drew me in, were the characters, and they all had their tones of voices. They all had their personalities. I love how they all worked together. And yeah, I just grew really attached to them. And finally, we have Maud Ventura, writer of My Husband. This one is translated by Emma Ramadan, and also it's gorgeous, but I was kind of obsessed with this book. This may not be for everybody based on reviews, because this is like one of those you either love or you hate, apparently. And there's not much of a plot exactly, not really. The whole time you're in the mind of this woman she's 40, she has an excellent life. She's got everything. She has a great husband, she has a great job, she's beautiful, she has two, healthy, happy kids, and she's obsessed with her husband. So that's what this book is about. She's obsessed with him. And this follows a week in her life. And you're in her head the whole time. You're following her day to day. You're following what she does with her kids. You're following her inner thoughts, what she does in her job. That's what you're following for a whole week. Doesn't sound like it would be that interesting. It sounds like it would be kind of boring, but it was fascinating. Like I said, she's obsessed with her husband. She's constantly worried about how she looks. She goes to great lengths to look perfect for him. She worries about everything he says. Like if he doesn't tell her goodnight, or the way he looks at her. She obsesses over things and overanalyzes everything. She's constantly worried he's going to leave her. Yeah, it's wild. It's kind of a weird read. It's simple, but it's effective. Besides being obsessed with her husband, she's very quirky and neurotic. She has these like really weird, interesting ways about her that I won't say because it may be spoilers, but I just found her really fascinating. I mean, you may say that she's unhinged, but she's also oddly relatable at times, which may be weird to say. I think we may all have those times of kind of overthinking and wondering, like, is he mad? He's really quiet. But she has those thoughts constantly, nonstop. He's gonna leave me, or he didn't kiss me goodnight, or, they're at a party and he compared her to a clementine when he should have compared her to a peach or something. Things like that, and it's all she thinks about. Like, constantly. It's her whole life. And it even trickles into her work. I love the writing style. I could not get enough of this book. I wanted it to keep going. I was obsessed with it. Yeah, you never learn the husband's name. She just calls him my husband, and that is said so many times in this book, and it just goes to show more of how obsessed she is with him. He takes priority over everything in her life. Everything. I found her completely fascinating. I was mesmerized. Just the way her mind works. This was almost like a human study. But yeah, I loved it. At this point, I would pick up literally anything she wrote. I don't even think I would see what it was about. I would just buy it. That was it. They're all amazing. I love every single one of them. So definitely check them out. On Friday, we will be doing my 2025 reading journal setup. I'm going to show you guys my new journal. I love it. And I can't wait to show you guys. I will see you on Friday. Bye for now.